Hi, welcome to Timely Talk with Emma Foulkes,
Hey, good afternoon. This is Andrew Snorton.
and we're glad to be back. Today we have a very interesting segment or a series of segments. We're going to talk about the importance of history. Last night, after Andrew kind of made me feel bad because I'm like the last person on earth who hadn't seen Hidden Figures yet.
Hey, I didn't make you feel bad. Only thing I said was definitely make sure to catch it. I think for those of you that haven't seen it, please take time to see it. I think one of the more powerful things before Emma goes into how it really impacted her is that there are a lot of stories out there that have not been told and have been bypassed. And for something like this, and I'm sure you're going to go in more depth with some of the takeaways you have, one of the biggest takeaways is if this is one example of something that hasn't really been told, imagine the other stories of impact, the contributions that people have made, whether it's due to ethnic background, gender. There's a lot more out there, so
Right.
go beyond just this. Don't let your discovery stop with just this film or just this book. What is your
Yeah,
take?
it was. I mean, it was. I was like a mixture of emotions when I sat in the theater. One was because of technology from a computer standpoint. I remember being in middle school, and we had I'm dating myself, the Radio Shack TRS 80s.
Yeah.
We had the TRS 80s, and then we had like a little computer lab, and there may have been like 5 or 6. And I was one of the few kids that knew how to program. You'd put the little things together and make like a rocket, and the little fire coming out of the bottom of the rocket. But I remember that as a young girl, girls were not encouraged in the computer lab. Like that was a boy thing. Boys did computer programming. Boys knew how to do stuff on computers, and it wasn't girls. And I'd never heard of any woman that knew anything about computers. Number one. Except for the lady that taught us in the computer lab, and she knew about as much as I did. And then I never heard of any woman, let alone a black woman, being in NASA or being involved in the space program at all. I felt like, there was a whole portion of history that was gone. Like what could have been different about my life and so many other, women's lives had they known about the space program or women in STEM or in mathematics and things like that.
Well, you made a good point because all this time, the only messages you have about STEM or space had always been men. And that's what you were always led to believe curriculum-wise and what have you. So you see a film like Hidden Figures, and for me, I always thought a computer was the same machine that we have right now. I didn't realize a computer was the person who was doing all the logarithms and the harder, like you said, STEM pieces. So now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. So now that misnomer of that name, and then like you said before, looking at the contributions of women, but being more specific, and especially with February being Black History Month, black women, black college-educated women. So there are stories of impact and relevance that if these people weren't in place, would we have even gotten to this point, or would it have taken us longer to get to this point? And based on the film, men in there didn't know their left from their right.
But it's a film, so unless we go into the historical context, we have to also remember, because they did a film about Benghazi that wasn't true, so we gotta,
so some of it might have been for dramatic effect, but you can think during that time when not only were black people just fighting for basic civil rights, it had to be compounded when you look at gender issues.
Correct.
So if you're the only woman in a male field, there are so many battles that you're fighting, and it's almost like the boy said with double consciousness, you got to fight 2 fights, but for black women, y'all fighting like 10, 20 fights at once.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of the sad part is, the other thing that I came away with was, my goodness, it's some 40, 50, 60 years later, and women in STEM are still having some of the same issues. It doesn't, whether you're black, white, whatever your race is, there's still a lot of issues in STEM, and it's just kind of like, how much further along would we be if those STEM fields, if it was more inclusive?
You make a very good point. I think one thing that helps is that for women or anybody who is, quote, outside of the norm, who's in STEM, the good thing is this is one example, which means there have to be other examples out there.
Right.
So it forces you to continue to discover. But more importantly, it's almost like there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
There's some, and at least you know, look, there are people that came before me that fought battles, and while that battle still remains, you have some type of hope or solace. It's like, darn, they fought those battles without the access that I've got.
Right.
So what battles can I fight so 20, 30, 40 years from now, when there's more access to resources, how much further can we continue to chip away? So we understand we just can't stop right here.
Yeah, one of the things that I was, one of the highlights of the film for me was when one of the women taught herself Fortran, the computer language. And the fact that not only did she teach herself that, but she told the other women that, hey, there's a new machine coming along that can do 2,400 or 24,000, whatever that number is, calculations in X amount of seconds. They're not going to need us anymore. Basically, we need to learn how to run this machine. And so that, again, staying ahead of the curve.
But that also ties in when you think about what people do in their careers, professional development. What's
Correct.
the whole point? Or when you go back to school, or you learn get another certification, or bump it, you learn how to do something new. The point is, you're keeping yourself relevant, you're
Correct.
keeping yourself marketable. So even on that everyday tangent, when people hear that, they're like, yeah, right, whatever. But then when you saw it in action,
Right.
just with that one instance, it's like, wait, there really is something to it.
Yeah.
So continue to learn, continue to discover, definitely.
So definitely send us your feedback on if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, or if there were some things in history that you learned about as an adult that kind of took you aback. We'd love to hear about it. Actually look it up and have a conversation about it. We'll be back after this.